Hi people and hello my Chili Con Carnage crew, it's Chili here from Live Listen Erased, and I'm here with a special episode of Live Listen Erased. This one is going to be very interesting because I have Brendan here from All This Filth. Brendan, it's so good to have you on the show.
Hey, Chili man, thanks for having me. It's going to be an interesting show. It's glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to be bringing this back again because it's been too long since we've had this, and to have a special guest such as yourself on here, I'm just pleased to be bringing this back to it. And of course, Australia, hell yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the main thing as well. Now, for those who are unaware of the show and how this operates, Live Listener Race is basically me selecting 3 albums, and you have the choice. You have the choice to erase an album forever. You have a choice to listen to an album forever, but never see that album live, or the band rather. And of course, live, where you get to see this album performed in its entirety live once only and can never listen to it again. So this is some tough choices to be made, especially Brendan, because we've been chatting a bit off screen as well a few weeks ago. You had your album drop as well. I should mention Brendan is a member of All This Filth, a fantastic band. But you gave me some interesting choices as well with your messages that we were talking about before. So there are some interesting things as well coming up. And I've got to say, these 3 that I've picked for you, I hope they're very difficult for you.
Gonna be because I think the list that I gave you, I remember you told me like, oh, narrow it down to 3, and I was like, here's like 10. There's so many albums that are important to me, and so many great bands that have influenced me throughout the years. So to narrow that down to 3. And I don't know the 3 yet. I don't know the 3 you've chosen, but to narrow that down to 3 and then to choose the in that format, it's going to be really interesting and difficult. So yeah, bring it on. Let's do this.
Let's do this. He's up for the challenge, everyone. So, without further ado, the list is upon us. And for you, Brendan, I have the following. Slipknot's self-titled album, the debut, sorry, I should say. Fear Factory, Obsolete. And Nailbomb's Point Blank. The 3.
No.
If that was that's going to be made into a short. 3 very difficult options here because there is some damn impressive records to be picking. And of course, these are, as you said, massive influences in your life from before. So, where would you like to begin?
Um, let's start with the first one you mentioned, Slipknot self-titled. That
Tell.
was of the 3, that was probably the first one that I got into, just chronologically speaking. Just because of how old I am, the age and the time that it came out in the late 90s. I believe it was 98 or possibly 99. I'm not 100%
Yeah, 99, I think. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, so I remember being introduced to this album the way that we used to back in the day. So I was in high school at the time. I think I was about 14, 15 years old. And a friend of mine, Paul, from school, came up to me, and we often had discussions like this. He'd come up, and it was literally like something you'd see on like South Park or something. It's like he's like, dude, have you heard of this band? They're called Slipknot. There's like 20 of them, and they wear masks. One of them has a dildo on his face, and they back each other on stage. And I was like, what? Where do I sign up? And it's obviously, back then, like we had the internet, but the internet isn't what it was. You had the
Yeah.
dial, and you had the one computer in the house in like your brother's bedroom or whatever. So to get on the internet, you had to go into your brother's bedroom, whatever.
Mm-mm.
So the first thing I did, I remember hearing about this. I went down to the Sanity CD store, went to the metal section, which is like nothing like they are these days.
No.
Well, it's funny because they were small, then they got big, and
Yeah.
now CD sections are small again because of CDs these days. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I remember going to the Sanity. I remember picking up the album cover without sort of. Oh no, I got online and I downloaded Wait and Bleed and
Mm-hmm.
Surfacing because they were the 2 most popular songs.
Yeah.
I downloaded them, and of course back then dial up. Took me about a day and a half to download one or two songs because
Yes.
every time someone would phone, you'd get disconnected from the internet. Yeah, that's how old I am, kids. Listen
Yeah,
up.
the younger generation just don't get that. They're like,
Yeah,
what?
they're
You
like,
had to share the phone with the internet? What's that?
yeah. What the hell are you talking about? Like, yeah, and like downloading a song a day. What are you talking about? So yeah, I remember downloading those two songs and Wait and Bleed and Surfacing were the first two I remember hearing, and then like Eyeless as well,
Oh, yeah.
which is great songs. And so I remember hearing this, and I was already into sort of metal at that stage. I was listening to some Soulfly
Oh, yeah.
and bits and pieces. Ramstein, I was already big into and whatnot as well. So I was already, they were sort of my gateway bands, and this was one of the big gateway bands for me was Slipknot. You know how they talk about gateway drugs being marijuana? Slipknot was sort of my
Slipknot's,
marijuana.
I swear, Slipknot's like the metal community's marijuana.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, there's so many people that I know that have that, sort of, they were curious about metal and Slipknot just ushered them in. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
through Slipknot, you end up finding other bands, heavier things, and your journey takes off from there, sort of thing.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they were that band. I remember going to Sanity, looking at this album cover, and sort of harping like, "What the fuck is going on there?" Because you just see these dudes. It's got the red cover.
Yep.
They're all in the red jumpsuits. Got the dude with the deal. I was like, "There's a guy with the dildo on the face." Like.
There's Dildo Man!
Yeah, exactly. And I just remember, unbeknownst to me at the time, the lead singer Corey Taylor with the mask, and he's got the dreadlocks going on and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
And I was like, that just looks cool. And I remember being like, man, that just looks mental. Like it's, a little bit dangerous looking. You know what I mean? Like you look, that's some mental asylum stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I just remember thinking, cool. So I bought it, took it home that day. And I remember saying to people at the time, I was like, dude, this is the heaviest thing I've ever heard in my life. Which at the time,
It was!
it was. I just remember thinking, there's no band heavier than this band. And like,
Oh, yeah.
which is funny looking back,
Oh,
because
yeah,
when
yeah.
you hear the, tech death now or, slam or grind,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
just like,
Yeah, there's
yeah,
like...
not even close. But back then I was like, holy shit. Like, even though they had the catchier songs as well, I think that's why they are a bit of a gateway band because you do have like the clean sung choruses.
That
And
helps.
yeah, which sort of eases your transition into the metal. But the thing that actually attracted me was the heaviness and the aggression because I was just like, and the groove that got me because it's visceral. You feel that rather than think about it. So yeah, I think that's the album we'll talk about first. I think because yeah, chronologically that got me sort of into it. I mean, and it's probably my favorite Slipknot album to this day. I mean, Iowa was great. Don't
Ah.
get me wrong, Iowa is a great album as well.
Mm.
And they're the two big ones, and since then, depending on your opinion, they've ebbed and flowed with it. Not, I'm not going to slam them. I'm not going to say anything like negative,
No.
but I'm not a massive fan of the last album or two. I will say, but more power to them. It's their creative journey, and they can do what they want.
Yeah.
And there's artistic merit in what they're doing. So but yeah, that album, like to this day, I still really love that album. So yeah.
There was one of the things I remember hearing about this, would have been years later, because what you're telling me right here is exactly the same as to what I had coming up with Slipknot. Heaviest
Yep.
band ever, gateway band, 100%, and everyone's just thinking, oh my god, and they've moved on to black metal and all this stuff ever since. But making Slipknot look like little toddlers in the field. But anyway, disregarding that for a moment, I remember there was Corey Taylor giving an interview sometime, and he was talking about back in the day. He was really nervous, which seems so odd to now, but he was really nervous back in the day to doing live gigs that his mask, he would actually put like tacks inside of it. So he'd put this mask on, feel the pain in his face to get that aggression going in him.
Oh, wow.
It's a crazy story. I mean, half the thing, I guess, that made Slipknot as big as they are is also the visual imagery, which really helps the band. They're demonic looking. Yeah, a lot of metal bands just exist and they look like regular blokes and such, but then Slipknot comes along, 9 dudes in a jumpsuit wearing masks. We don't know the IDs of them. The internet's in its infancy. probably better than it is now in Australia. But you know, it's there's this whole mysterium around the band, I guess, and yeah, that debut album, it got a lot of people that I knew that weren't metalheads intrigued on the band Slipknot, you know. And yeah, Wait and Bleed, wow, that's the first Slipknot song I heard by them too. It was definitely found that online somewhere and found its way onto a burnt CD sometime later on. But
Yeah, definitely. Do you remember they had that and here's the like, this is gonna age me as well. Do you remember that VHS tape, Welcome to Our Neighborhood?
I never bought it, but I do remember it.
Yeah, so I had that. I remember going to one of the local record stores here. I think it was Dada Records, which is still open,
Wow.
thankfully. And like, it's an independent store, which is, even better.
Nice.
And yeah, I remember finding it on VHS back then because, like, only rich people had DVD players back in the day.
Yeah.
Only the rich, the rich kids at school, like with the parents who were doing well, like you've got to, like, whoa. So yeah, I had the VHS for Welcome to Our Neighborhood, and also there was a Roadrunner. There was a Roadrunner VHS I bought the same day, Drilling the Vein 3, which was one of those compilation VHSs, which had videos from a bunch of different Roadrunner bands.
Oh yeah.
So you had like you had a couple video clips from Slipknot, which ended up they were on the Welcome to Our Neighborhood, and then you had like Typo Negative and a few other bands.
Probably would have been like Machine Head or something like
Yes,
that.
Machine Head was on there. Aggression as well because it was an Australian sort of release. So Aggression was actually on Dark Carnival Records, which was like owned by Roadrunner.
ICP. Isn't
No,
that
no. Yes, I thought that too, but it's not. Like it's called Dark Carnival, but it was like this imprint that Roadrunner owned for Australia.
Oh.
Sort of thing. But that's the only thing I'd ever heard of it or some shit. And but either way, yeah, I used to think that as well. I was like, wait, are they ICP? But yeah, it's got nothing to do with ICP. I think they probably had to get rid of that because of the ICP thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I remember that VHS, Welcome to Our Neighborhood, and yeah, it was pretty cool. Actually, at the same time, I got Mudvayne's live dosage, live in Peoria on VHS as well, which was cool.
That would have been good. Berber ding, berber ding.
Exactly. It's funny. I just saw them recently.
I saw them too.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Cold Chamber?
Yeah, Cold Chamber.
Yeah.
And Mudvayne at Metropolis Perth over here in WA. And that was great. A bit of a blast from the past. And and actually, I've seen Mudvayne twice because I haven't been to Australia that many times. I've seen Mudvayne back in like 2005, I think.
Yeah.
And then this year. And I actually think they were better this year. And same with Cold Chamber. I saw Cold Chamber in like 2012 at like Soundwave or something.
Okay.
And I genuinely believe Mudvayne was better, and both Mudvayne and Cold Chamber better now than they were back then, which is saying something about the professionalism of those guys and girls in the Chamber. But yeah, back to Slipknot. Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy time. That was the thing, actually.
It was that new metal scene. It was like that whole thing.
Yeah, when you're probably about the same age I am. Like, if Slipknot was one of your gateway bands, we grew up and new metal was the thing that was coming to the fore. That was yeah, it was huge. New metal started off as an underground and then just got huge. And Slipknot was one of those bands which propelled it. Although there is the debate whether Slipknot are new metal or not, because you had your Cold Chambers and such beforehand.
Yeah.
But I mean, Slipknot was part of that movement, I would say, and definitely again a gateway. Much like a lot of new metal bands, you can say that about Korn and Cold Chamber and such as well. But yeah, Slipknot for me were ushered in that whole. The whole generation of metalheads,
Oh yeah, definitely. And like I guess going back to the new metal typecast, because I know a lot of those bands hated that label. But a lot of them also evolved away from that scene. You had bands like Deftones who definitely changed.
I was going to say was Deftones.
Yeah. Deftones is like the number one point. It's like, okay, what about new metal bands? It's like, yeah, Deftones, but they fucking evolved, And the same as well with Slipknot. I mean, I would definitely call the first album new metal. I don't know if I'd call anything else after it, but Anyway, you're blurring the lines, subgenres, all that bullshit, and we all love to label
Yep.
stuff in the end of the day. But either way, it was good goddamn metal, and a perfect way to get into, well, that whole genre, especially, like you said, when you're around about that age. You know, you had Korn, you had Deftones, Mudvayne, all these other groups, and Slipknot was just amongst them, and pretty much the kings. I mean, if you were like listening to Limp Bizkit, then you know Slipknot was complete different area. and I remember a DeviantArt. Do you remember this website?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was always like there was a few artists, and there was one that was very prominent. He always used to draw a whole bunch of the bands around about this era, and I remember he drew this one, and it was like Fred Durst being like crucified, and Slipknot, surrounding him, like lighting his feet on fire and shit like that.
I remember DeviantArt, and there was a lot of people were doing that whole Slipknot versus ICP thing. So
Oh
like,
yeah.
like they had them like like you said, like Slipknot decapitating ICP or Slipknot versus Mushroom Head as well. Mushroom
Oh
Head,
yeah, the Mushroom Head is the big one. Yeah.
yeah, because everyone's like, oh, they're rivals, and I'm like, well, they're from different parts of the country, and
Yeah.
if you want to be technical about it, Mushroom Head were around longer than Slipknot, and they were all like, oh, they sound the same. I'm like, no,
No.
not at all. If you actually listen to them, they don't really sound the same. There's elements, yes. But I mean, if you actually listen to them, you're like, no, they're not, the same at all.
Oh, on a completely somewhat related note, I should say, have you checked out the Anders Kolsefny re-recording of Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat?
No, I haven't heard the re-recording. I have like a burnt version of the original
Oh
Mate
wow.
Feed Kill Repeat as well. Obviously because back then, another one that I got a mate who had slightly better internet to download for me and burnt it onto a disc for me. And I remember hearing that and being like, yeah, this is kind of cool. I guess it was pretty cool. There was some good stuff on it, and you could pick the songs where they changed them. I think the self-titled song Slipknot they ended up making into not Eyeless. Was it Eyeless?
Nah, I think Eyeless was its
No.
own track.
No,
It's
what am I
like
thinking of? Sick.
Sick. Yeah.
They took that from the self-titled song Slipknot. It just sped it up a bit. If you hear the, dun 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, I'm like, dude, that's just that sped up. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
true.
cool to hear the evolution of those songs. And obviously there's only one is still pretty much the same song, and
Tattered and Torn? No, Gently, I think it was. Gently is on there? Yeah.
Gently is
Yeah.
on there. Yep.
And what was the other one? Killers Be Quiet, which I
Killers Are
think
Quiet, which turned
is
into
is it Eeyore or something like that?
no, Killers Are Quiet turned into Iowa. Dun dun dun.
Yeah, that's
Dun,
it.
dun, dun. Yeah. They had that song. Fucking was it Do Nothing Bitch Slap with all the.
Yeah, Mr. Bungle influence. I'm just like, what the fuck is going
Yeah.
on?
It's pretty crazy. Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't, but yeah, I mean, I haven't heard the to answer your question. I haven't heard the re-recording. No, have you heard it?
Yeah, I did a review on it just a couple of days ago, and look, it's good. It brings out brutality within, I guess, that Slipknot kind of sound. But there seems to be a little bit of problems surrounding it as it's coming to light. Apparently, it was released a bit earlier than it should have been, and is in a bit of a demo kind of stage. So it's as of recording this episode, anyway, there's a little bit of a wow, what's going on then, So because I know Anders, he wants to tour with Corey Taylor's Blessing regarding that album as well. So yeah, that was it's good though. Do check it out. I think if you type in Chaosis, which is a New Zealand band. They were like the backing band for Anders on this one, and you can find it through that.
Chaosis with a CH or with like a K?
Kaosis.
Yeah.
So you can check it out through that means.
Did you type in Anders Kolsefny and Mate Feed Kill Repeat, or do you have to type in Chaosis?
I think if you type in Chaosis, it's easy to search. Or you can just type in Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat, probably, and get the easiest way.
Yeah,
but
I'll check it out.
There you go, people out there. If you're curious, you can actually go back and listen to re-recordings of the original demo from Slipknot. And Anders is the original singer before Corey jumped into it. So
yeah, we probably should say that.
Preface this one.
We're just sort of, waxing lyrical on things like,
We're expecting everyone just to know,
Yeah, exactly. Probably should have thought thought of that.
Come on, people, catch up the speed here.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so I think we've got that first debut Slipknot album covered pretty much. Which one would you want to cover next in regards to Fear Factory or Nailbomb?
All right, we'll go chronologically how in order I got into them. We'll go Fear Factory,
Nice.
Obsolete, which is probably one of my favorite albums of all time, if not my
Wow.
favorite album of all time. If you put a gun like not that I like I'm like odds definitely, but if you put a gun to my head and said pick your favorite album of all time, like just the first thing that would come to mind would be Fear Factory's Obsolete. Now, Fear Factory took me a little bit to get into,
Oh yeah.
uh, because I liked initially, because I was an immature teenager, I liked the aggression. I love the industrial crunchy guitars, this,
Mm.
syncopated,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love that sort of, those rhythms and such. I love the drums, man. The drums on Fear Factory, man.
Oh,
Jeez. Like, just
they're
remember hearing that
nuts.
music.
I
Yeah.
remember seeing in a magazine, it was a skateboarding magazine back in the day, and they were drawing about Fear Factory's drumming patterns, and they just had the drummer like plugged into a three-phase outlet, and it's like, oh, so that's how you do it, you know?
Yeah, 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 I just remember hearing that and being like, wow, that's inhuman,
Oh yeah.
the drums, and yeah, the vocals. But I remember like being not massively keen on the cleans initially, but
Mm.
like they grew on me, and I love them now. And Burton C. Bell is one of my favorite vocalists of all time.
He's
I
so
actually
good.
all of my favorite vocalists actually have unique voices. The sort of vocalist that as soon as you hear him, you're like, oh, that's that guy. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like as soon as you hear Burton C. Bell, you're like, well, that's Burton C. Bell. As soon as you hear Corey Taylor, that's Corey Taylor. Max Cavalera, you know what I
Mm.
mean? Gina Marino, like we were talking about before. Chad from Mudvayne. As soon as you hear them, it's very distinct. You're like, oh, that's that guy.
Yeah.
Uh, Rob Flynn from Machine Head as well.
Oh yeah.
Um, you know, um, Till from Ramstein,
God,
all that sort of
you're
stuff.
just
Because
rattling off a
again,
best of at this stage.
oh yeah, well, because the thing is like, these albums existed, and they were around the same time as I was getting into all these other bands as well. So anytime I
Mm.
think of these particular albums, I think of those bands as well because I was listening to them.
Mm.
Like I said, Paul, my friend from high school, was the same guy who was like about Slipknot, was like to told me about Ramstein, and he was like, "Dude, you heard of this band Ramstein? There's like 6 or 7 of them, and they're like from Germany, and they fuck each other up the ass on stage, and they shoot flames from their face." And I was like, "Where do I sign up?" Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like you just hear that, and then
It's the schoolyard talking, you're like, nah, this has got to be bullshit here, but
exactly.
no.
Same thing though. I heard about that straight down to Sanity that later that day or whatever. Picked up Ramstein's Mutter,
I can
which
imagine
is
Sanity like an employee just sitting there with a magazine, looks up, and then just goes, ah, it's you again. Just goes
yeah, it's
back
that
to
guy.
it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the same. I used to go to Sanity down at like Carousel Shopping Center here in Cannington,
Mm.
so my local, and like used to go down there, and that's where I got Slipknot self-titled, Ramstein's Mutter, Deftones White Pony. So you
Oh.
know, um, that's where and I have those memories. And so when I
Mm.
talk about any one of these albums, I think my mind just shoots off into like, and that album, and remember this and remember that, and
Yeah, yeah,
good
yeah.
times, because it's your formative years,
Hell
as well.
yeah. You're
So
growing up on this stuff, and this is the most impressionable music as well, so.
exactly. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, and Fear Factory for me was, much like Slipknot was a game changer in the scene. Fear Factory was actually, they came out before Slipknot, obviously,
Mm.
and I think directly influenced Slipknot, and you can sort of hear that in the music,
Yeah.
uh, and obviously in the vocal style, because previous to Bert and C. Bell, there wasn't too many, if any, vocalists doing the harsh screams and the growls with the clean singing in the choruses. So
Mm.
you was one of the first to influence the next generation of vocalists coming through, like your Corey Taylors and such.
Mm.
I think previous to that, most singers, were they either screamed or growled or
Yeah.
they sang. They didn't really do both. People argue, Phil Anselmo, and I was like, yeah, I guess. And I'm not, downplaying his influence on the metal scene and such, but
Mm.
Burton with his cleans, very unique style.
It was like two singers, like a
That's exactly what people used to say, the two singer thing. Yeah, exactly.
like a lot of these other vocalists or whatever, Phil Anselmo, I don't know, James Hetfield, if you want to go further
Yeah,
back, for example. Yeah, they do a little bit of like downplaying it clean, but it's not clean, clean. It's just
yeah,
softly spoken, I guess, almost. And
yeah. I mean, they're great singers in their own right. Sure, but this guy could, like, his cleans were
there was a
clean.
switch. There was just a switch,
Yeah,
and he'd just
it was
go
a switch.
between.
Um, whereas they sort of had more, like, to use a vocalist term, heat on their vocals, and where these guys had fire and then the clean. So I went between fire and clean instead of like fire and heat. So it was,
Ah,
like you
yes.
said, the switch, which is as a vocalist, I know that's ridiculously hard to do. So props to all of them. But yeah, Burton C. Bell, and but just for me, also that Fear Factory. I remember hearing them and just thinking to myself in my naive, because when you're young, you don't have any perspective on life or the world or music at that stage. I thought to myself, like, hey, this band, they sound so futuristic, Fear Factory. And I remember thinking they're always going to sound ahead of the game. They're always going to sound futuristic. And actually, to this day, I still think so because, they kind of have that like sci-fi movie track sort of thing. That
Yeah,
was one of
okay.
the things they did, like with all the samples from the Terminator and Blade Runner and such in a lot of their songs. So, and they were I think they probably were one of the first bands I heard with samples and stuff and synths and keys in the background, which again really influenced myself and all this filth with that sort of sound. I wanted to do that to incorporate that into my sound because I just loved the industrial overtones and just the soundscapes you could have as well as the metal.
Yeah.
Uh, it just that's and industrial metal probably became if I had to pick one of my favorite subgenres of metal because obviously through them I got into bands like Static X and
Oh, yeah.
Ministry and then Nailbomb and then Godflesh and then some of the new bands like Three Teeth and such like that. So it set me off on another course of discovery, obviously into industrial metal and then industrial just as well, with KMFDM and Nine Inch Nails and what have you as well.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so yeah, they were a massive influence on me. They sort of game-changing bands, Slipknot, Fear Factory. Yeah, I mean, just and still to this day, like they have a unique sound that they pioneered. And obviously, you can make the argument like, well, they just took what Ministry did and made it a bit more metal. I'm like, yeah, but everybody's doing that. Everybody's
Yeah.
taking their influences and then adding their own spin to it and combining things to then progress their sound. And I'm like, yeah,
That's just how music works, though.
exactly. That's evolution, right?
Yeah.
So Fear Factory is obsolete. Like a lot of people were like, oh, but Demanufacture. I'm like, yes, Demanufacture is a fantastic album, but truthfully, because I was the age I was, Obsolete came out in 1998,
Yeah.
and that was my first year of high school, and I was starting to get into this stuff between 98 and the year 2000. And yeah, Obsolete was the album that really captured me because I actually think it's just slightly more mature album than Demanufacture.
Yep.
Like don't get me wrong, I love Demanufacture. I love both albums for different reasons, but I think Fear Factor is a bit more of a complete album. It's got songs that are sort of almost more poppy as well. Like something like Descent, really light and but like still got did the cover of Cars
It's a
with
bit of a
Gary.
change, like
Yeah.
compared to Demanufacture.
Yeah, it is. And it's still aggressive though, because you still got Shock. You've still got Edge Crusher. You still got Smash the Devourer. Those are heavy songs,
Gotta love
man.
these titles of tracks sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, Edge Crusher just that's the pit song, man. And
Edge Crusher is amazing, and the bass as well. Like
yeah,
they change it up with that. What is it? They use a double bass, I think, in that one.
yep.
Yeah,
Stand up double bass. Yeah, exactly.
which
For
is like,
sure.
why would you use a double bass in metal? Nah, but Fear Factory did, and it freaking worked. Do it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded great, now. Obviously, they don't do it live. Well, I
Nah.
haven't seen any footage of them doing it live. It would be pretty impractical to drag a big double around life on
Unless
tour.
you're like the Living End or something, but that's a bit
Yeah,
different.
true, true.
That's their entire sound for the Living End. Like
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, you would only do it in that one Fear Factory song.
Oh,
It'd hardly be worth bringing it.
sorry, it just reminded me because you mentioned Roadrunner and Typo Negative before, but I remember there
Yeah.
was the video clip for Christian Woman, I think it was, and there's Peter Green just standing there because he's like 6'6" tall motherfucker, and he's standing
Oh,
there with the double bass, and it looks like a tiny normal bass
was,
guitar.
was that Black Number One?
Black number one, yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
Black Number One. Yeah, 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 yeah. You're right.
He's standing there with the upright bass, and he's holding it like a sorry. He's standing there with the double bass, but he's holding it like a normal
Yeah,
bass, and it looks small because the guy is as tall as a
yeah,
goddamn
huge.
basketball player.
The guy's like 7 foot tall, so it's
Yeah.
like he's
Oh,
had that deep bass voice,
oh my
like
god. Yeah, he
really.
was perfect. He was a bass player with a baritone voice, if anything.
Yeah,
He just
yeah,
emulated his
exactly.
machine there. I guess when it comes to Fear Factory for me, I missed the boat getting into them early back in the
Yep.
day. I definitely had a few of their songs. I liked a few of their tracks, but I never got my hands anyway on some of their albums. And the first album I went and listened to was Demanufacture.
Yep.
So for me, you're saying I'm silly, but now you're pointing out these things. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Demanufacture is good, somewhat flawed to a tiny degree, very tiny, but Obsolete feels like a bit more of a precise,
Mm.
refined
Yep.
record, you
Yes.
know. And
Yeah.
I think now I guess I can understand where you're coming from, and especially given the fact that you also grew up with it as well. You grew up with it, I should say. That helps a massive part as well.
Yeah.
For an album like Obsolete, and it's oh god, Edge Crusher. Damn, I just can't get over that track.
Yeah, it's a great song. Like I was telling you before we came on air, like, we opened for Machine Head and Fear Factory just a couple
Mm,
weeks ago here in Perth, which was a fantastic show. And it's not the original lineup of Fear Factory, so we'll get that out of the way. But the new lineup killed it. They were great, sounded awesome. New singer nailed it. Um, and like, that song Edge Crusher came on, I was still like, yeah, in the pit, it's one of the ones you got to get in the pit for, basically. It's
oh
just
yeah.
like, wow, this
Oh,
is cool.
and what's that like? Because I was going to lead into this one actually. That I saw you had opened up for Fear Factory and Machine Head recently when they toured Australia. What's that like to, I guess, come from an aspect where this is one of your biggest albums growing up, and here you are now opening for the band themselves?
Yeah, so a bit of context there. Machine Head also is one of my favorite all-time bands as well growing up. So this gig was massive for me. Like
Mm,
probably more than anyone else in the band because both I had tickets to this gig anyways. I was going to this gig because I love those bands. And then like we'd applied to open for them, and we didn't think they'd be openers because the last couple times Machine Head have been in Australia, they've done like an evening with, so it was like just 3 hours, just Machine Head, no openers. And I thought, well, they've got Machine Head and Fear Factory. I was like, they're both headliners in their own right.
mm,
So I figured they're both going to play hour and a half, 2 hour sets each, and there'll be no openers. So
mm.
I hadn't really planned on, you know, we applied for it in hope, just not thinking anything. And then we got the email and it was like, yeah, you guys are opening. And we're like, what? Like, my manager, he messaged me and he was like, you got the Fear Factory Machine Head support. And I was like, that's not
Fuck.
funny. And don't mess with me, man. Like,
This ain't
you
April
know,
Fools, is it?
yeah, exactly. I was like, that's not funny, man. And he was like, no, seriously. And I was like, whoa, cool. So, so yeah, it was a surreal moment to open for them as well. People have been asking me like, oh, were you nervous? And I was like, Not really in a weird sort of way because we've been around a while now and we've sort of slowly risen up through the ranks and like we've worked very hard to get there. So
Mm,
I was more excited. I was more anxious about the logistics of the gig, like getting there, setting up, where are we going. But once I'm on stage, once I start singing and once we're playing, everything's fine. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that's then I'm in the zone and I'm like, it doesn't for me that it was great to have a massive crowd. Obviously, the biggest crowd we've ever played to. It was like sold out, 1,100 people, I think it was.
Mm,
So,
wow.
a big venue with a balcony. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh shit.
I did that. I did that. yeah, I thought to myself, I'm going to do some crowd work here. And I was like, when am I going to get this opportunity again? So I did that whole, how's everyone up the top doing today in the balcony? And everyone, they were like, yeah. And I was like, sweet, the crowd are into this. And I was like, how's everyone up the back? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, how's everyone in the pit? And they were like, and I was like, that's where it's at. Let's do this. So, I had to have my little rock star moment because I was like, when am I going to get a chance to say, how's everyone in the balcony again? Like, let's be realistic here. Metal's not the biggest genre in the world, and
Mm.
especially, here in Australia. So when you're playing local gigs, they're much, much smaller shows.
Oh yeah.
We have a great following, don't get me wrong. We have great support here in Perth, and we've got some good fans in the eastern states and what have you, and a few fans scattered across the world here and there. But this was next level. So yeah, it was really cool and a good moment if you put Machine Head and Fear Factory together, they're two elements that definitely make up a lot of all this filth. So yeah, it was
Oh,
fantastic. Probably one of the best nights I've had in a while because after opening and playing a really cool opening set, I got to walk off stage and just go watch two of my favorite bands of all time, like winning. Do you know what I mean?
hell yeah.
And it was great because I stood up near the sound desk, sort of near where the bar was, between the sound desk and the bar. And then all night, people were walking to the bar and they were recognizing me. They're like, so you can't really hear at gigs, but people would look at me and they'd go, and then they point at the stage, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, that was me on the stage. And they're like, yeah, you guys are wicked. Yeah, they're shouting in your face because, it's loud. And they're like, you guys are awesome, rah, rah. I don't think I bought a drink for the rest of the night. Do you know what I mean? I was like, by the time Beer Factory finished, I was standing there with both hands, with drinks in both hands and a drink next to me on the ground.
Oh.
Fine, I'm like,
Oh
no,
no,
man.
such a shame.
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, first world problems, right? Like, well, I don't have enough hands to hold all the free drinks people are buying me. But to be fair, those moments, as you'd probably know in metal, anyways, and in the music industry in general, are few and far between. So I took the moment in, I enjoyed it for what it was, and yeah, it was a great night all round.
Yeah, perfect. That's what you got to do. You got to take those like wins and stuff like that.
Definitely.
When you get a good concert as well, fuck.
Mm,
And that would have been something crazy, I guess, from like your perspective, where you bought tickets to the gig before.
yeah.
Obviously, they update these info as they come along, but you probably would have got the email, and it's like your band is performing, and you're probably looking at the ticket card. Oh, look at that! That's me. That's my
Yeah.
name.
Yeah, yeah, it was a bit like that once we got announced and we made a little we had they had the tour poster and our manager sort of made a version of the tour poster and put our logo on it as well
Ah,
because they didn't really have time to do that and they eventually did
yeah,
List eventually did but we made a little one and I was like that's really cool because
that's
you got the
awesome.
Machine Head, Fear Factory, all this filth and I was like and really, when you look at it, that's evolution, right?
Yeah, like I mean, these
Right.
guys all started a small band somewhere as
Yeah,
well, so.
exactly. So it's like this plus this equals that. So
Mm-mm.
yeah, it's kind of cool. Obviously them, and again, there's heaps of other bands that influence as well. Sepultura as well, Max Cavalera. Anything that guy touches.
The
But
man of a million riffs, freaking Max Cavalera. Like,
yeah,
jeez, that guy is
exactly.
just full of riffs. I swear he's got a new album out every week or something.
He's got a new side project every other week as well. What's Yeah, because when you think about it, Sepultura, Soulfly, Nailbomb,
Cavalera
Factory
Conspiracy.
Conspiracy,
Yeah,
Killer Be Killed,
yeah.
and that new one,
Oh,
what are they called? I
yeah.
forgot the last two albums they've got. What are they called? Go Ahead and Die. Yeah, no, yeah, that's what they're called.
So simple,
Yeah, Go Ahead and Die. Yeah.
but that's such a Cavalera thing, and I guess
Yeah.
also a perfect transition onto the next album.
Yes, which neatly brings us round. Nail Bomb, Point Blank.
Nailbomb Point Blank. I've got to say straight up, before you discuss this one, I knew of this album's existence for a very long time, but I never listened to it in full. Only up until about a couple of weeks ago, around about the time you messaged me, and it's also got its 30th anniversary this year, a couple of weeks
Oh,
ago.
wow.
Yeah, so I thought, what perfect what perfect timing. 30th anniversary was a couple of weeks ago. You've mentioned this album almost within the same time frame. I think it was only about a week difference.
Yeah.
I like the universe is telling me I got to go listen to this freaking effort. So I went in and I listened to this effort for the first time in full, and yeah,
Yep.
there is a lot to unpack with this one. So Nail
Well, first,
Bomb.
what did you think? What did you think? I know you're like mind blown, but like, let's put it into words. What did you think?
Okay, yeah. So I had heard, one or two tracks here or there, and I kind of like, yeah, they're fine, decent little metal entries there. And maybe it was the album's artwork that always put me off. It's so goddamn,
Yeah.
it's such an impactful album cover. If you're not aware, maybe if I'm editing this, remember, please, usually I forget, but to put the album artwork up. And if I didn't, it's a person pointing a gun at someone's head, and it is a real
Photo.
image. It is a real photo from the Vietnam War. I've been to Vietnam several times. I've been to all the all the museums regarding that, so I know exactly a lot from that aspect. But the music itself, I was listening to it in Vietnam, to be honest. I was on holidays.
Oh
So,
wow.
yeah, there was like this weird whole, the whole universe was weirdly connected in this one instance when I was listening to it. Which, actually, while I was in Vietnam, I went and checked out where the Burning Monk was, that photo, the Rage Against
Oh
the
yeah.
Machines album cover. Yeah, I went to that location as well. Because, yeah, it's such a massive, impactful scene,
Yeah.
obviously, for that one. But as for the music, I don't know. I guess when I listened to their songs back in the day, I wasn't really, because it's very heavy, it's very hard, it's hard
Yeah.
hitting stuff, right? And I wasn't. I don't know how to describe this. I wasn't prepared, maybe, And over the last couple of years, I've started to get into much heavier stuff with, Behemoth, and a whole bunch of other bands, really opening up a few more of the black metal scenes, and it's all this other stuff. But when I listened to Nailbomb this time around, I don't know, it all clicked. Its
Yeah.
aggression just finely tuned. It's a very, like we said, it's a very hard hitting album, as the album cover suggests. But it was such an impactful record. I don't know how, I don't know how to describe it too well, because it was leaving me speechless, when I'm going through it and hearing, Gorillas, for example, or
Yeah.
Cockroaches, and
I love
these other
rock. Yeah.
songs. Just the first, couple of tracks are just wasting away, by, what's that one? Vai Toma no Ku,
But yeah,
which,
that's a great song.
interestingly, I don't know if that's I'm gonna guess that's a Brazilian wording, but if it's Vietnamese, "ku" is dick. So,
Uh,
and yeah, that's all I thought of when I was listening to that. But yeah, Cockroaches, powerful. Fuck, it's just such an interesting little band and a one-off side project. They only performed one concert, I think.
two.
Was
They
it
did
two
two.
concerts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So yeah, and they actually released one of them as a live thing, live at Dynamo.
Mm.
It's called Nail
Cock-
Bomb Proud to Commit Commercial Suicide. Um, which is actually funny because it's a Max Cavalera thing. So Nail Bomb, for those who don't know, is a side project of Max Cavalera from at the time just Sepultura and No Soulfly. At that time,
mm.
he was still in Sepultura at the time, and Alex Newport from a band, sort of a I don't even know how to describe them, like grungy noise.
Like the
Me-
Melvins.
yeah. So that sort of vibe band called Fudge Tunnel,
That's it.
uh,
Yeah.
from England, and funnily enough, Alex Newport ended up marrying one of Max's daughter, or like his daughter, or and so he became part of the Cavalera family
Ah.
by marriage. But anyways, yeah. So it was just the two of them and a freaking drum machine back in the day. This is before like your Pro Tools and all your different drum editing programs. This is literally an old school drum machine. And they did, when they recorded, they had some tracks with a drummer, and when they played live, they obviously had a drummer.
Hmm.
But they mixed sort of. It's hard to describe. It is really
It's
hard
like
to describe.
industrial. It's
Yep.
industrial elements in the drumming styles, but
Yeah.
with
So there's industrial. there's groove metal, there's thrash,
Mm.
like obviously a bit of death, a bit of hardcore punk. I wouldn't say grind, but
No.
like then there's that like sludgy sort of noise sort of element to it from the from Fudge Tunnel influence and but yeah, it's just the two of them doing both of them playing guitar and vocals, so
Mm.
they go vocals back and forwards. Um, Interesting side note is I've read a lot of interviews with Max Cavalera because obviously, like, like I'm just obsessed with the guy. And he says to this day it's still probably his favorite album ever because it's the heaviest album he's ever done.
Wow.
Because it is like just in like you said, everything about it's heavy. The imagery, it's
Yeah.
heavy imagery. The album is just it's in your face. It's not like
It's like
heavy as in like brutal death metal.
no.
Like you got to hear it.
It's visceral. Like
Yes, it's impactful.
mm.
It sounds very simple as well, and like a lot of the riffs is simple and it's simplistic, but like primitive and visceral. And I think it's great because like also what I wanted to do with all this filth is perfectly combine the precision and mechanical side of like industrial metal
Mm.
with like the what they did with the more groove and tribal and thrash metal side of it, which is very aggressive but not as precise. It's very I wouldn't say it's loose, you know what I mean, but it's not mechanical. It's very organic. So you got mechanical and
Yeah.
organic, and they've combined that in this project where it's like, wow, that's really cool. You know what I mean? So, I
Mm.
mean, like other bands have done similar but different things, like Chimera, for example. I'm wearing a Chimera shirt right now, if you can see it. But they did the same thing, similar thing, adding, but it's more what they're doing, adding groove metal to with a bit of an industrial tinge, which they're another band that's a big influence for myself and all this filth, Chimera. But back to Nailbomb. So yeah, it's this side project. They played two shows ever because it was just a one-off side project. And one of them was a festival. They did the first show, which was just a club show in Belgium to warm up
Yeah.
for the festival, the Dynamo Festival. And they did that. And there's no footage of that club show, but apparently it's legendary. Anyone who was there, apparently there was like sold out because it was a tiny little club and there was people outside wanting to get in and listen to it.
Oh.
They played the next day at the festival, and that's they got there's a DVD you can watch, which, like I said,
Yeah.
like Dynamo, and their live album as well, CD, "Proud to Commit Commercial Suicide," which is
Mm.
great. Which is actually a phrase that Max got when he was in Sepultura, and he started turning in like demos for Sepultura's Roots album
Yeah.
when they started to go all like really try
Tribal. Mm.
yeah, really slow the music down and such and down tune and Monty Connor at Roadrunner Records was like, this is insane. You're abandoning like, your roots here. You're abandoning, your sound. Like he goes, I hope you're committing commercial suicide here. And Max was like, you'll see. And obviously Roots did
Mm.
what Roots did, and so he was right. And so he got that, he had that phrase stuck in his head. So therefore the, Nail Bomb album he called Proud to Commit Commercial Suicide, which is funny because basically it was the last thing Nail Bomb did, really. I mean, Max did those shows a couple of years ago where he, Soulfly performed Nail Bomb. If you remember, they did a
Ah.
tour, Soulfly performs Nail Bomb
Yeah.
without Alex
Loosely.
Newport. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. They didn't come to Australia, unfortunately, because I definitely would have gone. But yeah, it's this weird. Like, obviously, it's funny because like as I'm thinking about this, all these albums. So like, Slipknot came out after Fear Factory, but I got into Slipknot before Fear Factory, and Nail Bomb came out before all of them, and I
Mm.
got into Nail Bomb after all these bands as well. Like I'm going backwards because I think that's a good thing about metal is like I think when you're just getting into it, you tend to get into what's coming out right then and there. So
Mm.
for us growing up, the new metal thing was big. So Slipknot is your gateway, gets you in,
Mm.
and then you hear all the bands that are coming out at the time, and you're like, cool. And obviously, you can't hear what's coming out in the future because we don't have a time machine. You can't travel to the future.
No.
So then you start going, who influenced these bands? Like, you hear about these other bands and you start going back and start listening to shit that influenced the bands that you're already listening to,
Mm.
which is how I got into a lot of bands. But yeah, Nailbomb was one of those things that I got into, you know, probably I'd say maybe 2004, 2005-ish.
Yeah.
So my, if you say the year 1998 to 2000 was my early years, this is I'm still on early years, but starting to develop like,
Progress.
yeah, I know, by this stage I'm already well indoctrinated into, Machine Head, Factory.
Well versed in all those metal bands.
Exactly. And Sepultura, and I had all of Sepultura's albums by that stage, on
Mm.
CD and what have you. And so then, yeah, when was like, oh, I've got to hear this Nailbomb, man. I'd heard like Wasting Away on a like a Roadrunner compilation or something like that.
Mm.
And yeah, I bought the album. Like you said, that album cover, as soon as you pick it up, you look at it, you're
No.
like, wow,
Ooh.
that is something, because that is, again, I've heard interviews with Max Cavalera, and people have asked him, did you know what happened to that person? And like the thing is I don't think anybody knows, but I mean, it probably didn't end well.
No.
So, um,
No, it did not.
so yeah, everything about it is just heavy. And it's funny because, again, Max, in another interview I read, that where he recorded that album was literally in a house that they were living in at the time.
Mm.
And so he was living in it with his family, and so Alex Newport would come over and they recorded it in the house. And
Yeah, right.
and now that house is a school for the deaf.
Oh, shut the front door.
Yeah,
No
exactly.
way.
So yeah, in Phoenix, Arizona, and he says, because he still lives in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
Phoenix, Arizona, he still lives. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he goes. Sometimes he drives past that street, drives past that house, and it's school for the deaf, and he goes, "I got to have a little chuckle to myself." I'm paraphrasing here, but I
Yeah.
have a chuckle to myself that probably one of the heaviest albums I've ever recorded is now
It's
a school
school
for
for
the
the
deaf.
deaf.
Where I recorded it is now a school for the deaf.
That sounds like a joke that was written for the bloody death clock or something,
Yeah,
Metallocopus.
exactly.
It
I mean, you can't write this, right? It's
No.
life. Life is truth is way stranger than fiction.
Hell yeah.
So, yeah, that's an interesting little tidbit for you. But yeah, this album, I mean, it just hits you, and like I can describe it, and and you can describe it,
Mm.
and you can paint a picture with 1,000 words, and it still won't do it justice. And I think
Hmm.
that's like any album, really. You have to experience it. Do
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like people can give you this is what it kind of sounds like, and if it sort of, sparks your interest, go, well, I kind of like that style of music. I kind of like those bands. I might go check it out. That's
Mm.
cool. That's the best we can do, is say this is what it's kind of like.
Yeah.
Like, because the influences for that, again, I've read interviews. Ministry was a big one, and then they took what they were doing, like that, the hardcore punk stuff, the thrash, and yeah, apparently it came from like them just sort of jamming and showing each other riffs.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, so they were like, "Oh, here's this, Sepultura riff," and then Alex Newport was like, "Well, here's this Fudge Tunnel riff," and then they were like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. What if you did this? What if we did that?" And that's why there's a bonus track at the end of, it might be Point Blank, it might be Proud to Commit Commercial Suicide. Either way,
Mm.
there's a bonus track. I don't know if you've heard it, but it's one of those things where there's heaps of silence, heaps of silence, heaps of
Oh,
silence.
the CD one, the old school one. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's actually after the song "Sick Life" on the album on Point Blank, and so it gets to the end and it busts out into, like, you just start hearing this music, and then it goes into the riff, the breakdown from Dead Embryonic Cells, Sepultura, down down
Oh yeah.
down 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 down, dun 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 dun. And then from there, it busts into, like, instead of going into the breakdown, it busts into like something similar to Fudge Tunnel's Spanish Fly, which, so they're combining the two, and it's kind of interesting because if the story is that they were showing each other riffs, and apparently those were the riffs that they were showing each other, and that inspired Nailbomb, and I'm like, that's
What?
really.
This weird little medley, and that's how it's started a whole
Yeah,
band.
yeah. So yeah,
Wow.
that's sort of just a little secret track at the end, like a little like tidbit goes to like 20 seconds or something, and they've just bust into it, and I'm like, that's really cool because it's got a really different edge to it. But yeah, I mean the album, yeah,
Did
it's
you?
very hard to describe.
It is very difficult. Did you know about like Alex Newport post now bomb? He's
Um,
gone into being a producer. He's
oh yeah, yeah. He
yeah.
produced like I think it was like Locusts and a whole bunch of bands.
He did
Like
he did the EP for the Mars Volta. I think he's
oh
also done
cool.
a bunch of what was that band that they did before with the Mars Volta? I can think of the album In Out and Casino or whatever. At the Drive-In, I think he did a few of their
Oh, yeah.
records.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Yeah, but he also did Block Party. I just had to check it there, which was
Oh,
like, what?
yeah, yeah. I mean, whatever. A job's a job, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I'll
it's a
take.
bit of-
But it's just such a weird disc. Imagine Block Party like sitting there and going, "Shit, we love Nail Bomb. We want the guy.
yeah.
Can we get him as the producer?"
I can't imagine that. I mean, maybe, yeah. Who
Who
knows?
knows? Yeah, you might be writing something that's a bit lot different to what your music taste actually is.
I mean, but if he does good work, he does good work. It might have been recommended by someone else. Who knows?
Mm,
Uh, but yeah, yeah, it's interesting because yeah, apparently he had no real interest in playing live so much. Because I remember Max was saying when they played those two nail bomb shows. He like Alex Newport had his back to the crowd a lot of the time, and apparently he used to do that in Fudge Tunnel as well, because that's how they met. Sepultura and Fudge Tunnel toured,
okay,
and Matt was like, "Hey man, you might want to like face the crowd or whatever." And apparently Alex is not big on playing live. He doesn't really like it that much,
okay,
according to what I've read. I don't know the guy, so I don't know personally, but yeah, apparently. So yeah, that's why he sort of got into the producing thing. Didn't really want to go out and tour and play live, which is fair enough.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, either way, it's a crazy time in history where these two creative people just got together and made this crazy album,
yeah.
which again influenced me, you know, in a huge way. I think yeah, one of my things is like I think I've gone on record a couple times with the dudes in all this filth, and I'm like, dude, I just want to combine Fear Factory, Chimera, and Nail Bombs Point Blank, and I just want to make something like that album. I want to do something that blows people's minds. I want that vibe. I want that edge. And I think I'm always just going to try. It's always going to be one of my goals to like reach for that. We
Go,
would like not copy it, obviously, because there's no point trying because you're
nah.
just not, and it's just you're going to be derivative. But to add that element, it's always in the back of my head. Like I said, I've got, they only released one album. I've got two Nail Bomb shirts. Well, two albums, including the live one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got Nail Bomb shirts, and like, I love it when I play a show and I've got a Nail Bomb shirt on, and people are like, "Who are Nail Bomb?" And I'm like,
Oh,
"Oh,
poor.
dude,
Let me
we're
tell you.
exactly." And then we go down this rabbit hole that we've just gone down.
Mm,
So yeah, it's yeah, and like I said, I got into it after those previous two albums we've spoken about, but it's that doesn't make it any less influential.
no.
I can still be influenced to this day. I'll hear a band where I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I want to incorporate some ideas they've got going into what we're doing. You could say, oh, well, that you're ripping people off. I'm like, well, not really. It's just, influence. It's where you get inspiration from. Um, so yeah, yeah, nail bomb, point blank. I can't
We
recommend it.
can't speak highly enough of the album. If you haven't
Yeah,
listened to it, listen to
yeah,
it.
all three of these albums, but this would probably be the least well known of the three albums.
Yeah.
Definitely, because like you said, a lot of people are aware of it but haven't heard it, and I dare say, check it out. And it might be a bit abrasive for a lot of people. First up, you might be like, "What the hell?" Like,
Mm.
especially that sound now, because back then that was like, "Wow, where's this come from?" There was only few bands doing that sort of thing, but now it's a bit more common.
They were very
But
ahead of the curve, actually, when you're thinking about it a little bit to that degree.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, definitely way ahead of their time. Well, you can argue like, well, Ministry was doing that industrial metal thing, and I'm like, yeah, but not like that.
No, no, no.
Like
Ministry
that.
were doing Ministry. Nail Bomb is,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, that's what I mean. You can't really describe it because you're like, well, yeah, they took influence from Ministry, but I wouldn't say they sound anything like Ministry, really.
mm,
Um, there's a little bit in it. If you're a big Ministry fan like I am, you sort of can pick elements out, but there's more, Sepultura, there's more hardcore punk in it. There's more Fudge Tunnel in it, obviously. So
yeah.
check it out. All three of these albums, if you haven't heard them, like straight after this,
Yeah.
after watching this, get on it, queue it up on a playlist, get the vinyls, buy the CDs, however you listen to your music,
Mm.
check them out. I can't recommend them highly enough.
And add a fourth to that list, being all this filth with "Tomorrow Will Be Better." The combination of these three records.
If you've got time, yeah, do us a favor and check out our album. Tomorrow Will Be Better. Just came out in February this year. Yeah, and it's got elements of all these things in it, and but it's all this filth. It's an all this filth album. If you're familiar with this, you'll know what to expect. I've done a few interviews recently where it's funny because like I obviously am involved in the process from start to finish with the album, with any of our albums, any of our songs.
Mm.
And I've spoken to people, and people ask me, how do I feel about the album? And I always say, ask me again in a couple of years, because
Yeah.
for me, when it first comes out, I'm just like through the process of like recording, getting through and releasing it. I haven't really grown with the album yet. It hasn't like it for me, it takes about an album, a year or two to fully appreciate what we've done.
Mm.
Sort of like you can't see the forest through the trees. I'm very much in the trees in the whole way through the process. So, I've done a few interviews with people and they said, "Oh, I would say that it's your most aggressive album, more aggressive than the last album, Misery Season." And I sort of stop and think to myself, I was like, "Yeah, I hadn't really considered that, but yeah, it probably is." It's it's more it is probably more aggressive. It's more of a if Misery Season was an album based on, if the general vibe, obviously it's aggressive, but
Mm.
it's and it's groovy and it's got the industrial overtones and such, but that's a dark, depressing album, whereas this one's still dark and depressing, but more aggressive. It's more based out of frustration than depression sort of thing,
Mm.
although they're all sort of hand in hand, but it's a different edge to it. But yeah, it's weird to me.
It's
Um,
one of those things because it's like something you would have lived and breathed for
yeah,
months. You can't disconnect yourself so
years.
quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So years. It's taken
Mm.
us years to write and record and put out that album. The recording was done like not last year, but the year before, and then it
Fuck.
was just getting mixed and mastered, and then once it was mixed and mastered, that was finished early last year, and then the business side of everything, just getting everything in order, just took forever. Just you have setbacks along the way, so the album's
Yeah.
just sitting there, it's ready to go.
Oh
Uh,
fuck. That's
and then a lot of
frustrating.
bands, a lot of bands describe this. It's like Devil Driver with their last album. Did that double release. Dealing with Demons Volumes 1 and 2.
Oh yeah.
And they recorded those at the same time and handed them into the record label at the same time. And it was like a year or two before the first one came out, and then another 2 years in the next before the next one came out. So I mean, the album was done 4 years ago by the time the whole thing's released.
Good lord.
And like so it's a common thing
Mm.
to have just the business side of things take that long, and it did, and it came out, and now here we are. So hopefully people like it, but we did our best.
Welcome, and for those I guess outside the music industry, there's a lot of hurdles to be clearing, like this one that you just mentioned. So yeah, it's not like you can just record a record and then pump it out next week, unless
Well, I
yeah,
mean, you
you
can if
can,
you
but
can, but like whether it's I mean the industry
independent is a bit
so much.
different. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, independently, yeah, you can. And like a lot of people do. I know people that maybe not albums, but they'll record singles and like or
yeah,
EP, release them because everyone's got a bedroom studio these days. So, people can pump out things really quickly. But I mean, there's an argument to be saying that, these days with social media, people want content constantly. So
mm,
whether you pump out songs constantly and give people that content, I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing. Apparently, it is. But I mean, does that lessen the effect if you're constantly popping out songs and there's no expectation, people are just constantly bombarded with new stuff? But is that a good thing? I don't know. I don't know the way to do it these days. Like,
no.
I don't think there is a
I
right
don't
way
think
or
there is any way to do it.
yeah. everyone does it differently, and like I see people pump out pretty regular songs. Like every couple of months, they'll drop an EP, and that seems to do really well for them, and that's good for their fan base. And then there are bands that like, 5 to 10 years for an album. Do you know what I mean? And but it still does well for them. So I think it's different for everyone, and everyone's got to work out their own way of functioning in this new and constantly ever changing music industry.
Yeah, and that's a big thing to take on board for, well, anyone, I guess, who's coming into the industry or thinking about it. So,
Yeah, definitely.
got to take this on board. So, I guess we've discussed these three albums now, and we will have to make a difficult decision now in regards to what we're going to be doing with these three records. What are your thoughts?
Okay. Okay. So okay. Yeah, it's really hard. It's really
We'll
hard
probably
because
have
they
to
all.
pause for like the next 5 minutes thinking
Yeah,
about
okay.
it.
So okay, we'll go in order of live, listen, erased, and
Hmm.
I'll explain what I'm thinking.
Sure.
So live, so an album I can only hear live once, but then I can't listen to the album ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, jeez. Okay, I'll say Nail Bomb, Point Blank,
Ooh.
because I've never seen Nail Bomb live.
Yeah. Okay. That
I've
that
never seen
makes
Nail Bomb
sense.
live. And when I say I want Alex Newport, I want Nail Bomb.
Yeah,
I want
you want that small club, the legendary bloody yes,
either or, man. I'll
either
take
or.
whatever. As long as the sound is good, and I want Max Cavalera, Alex Newport, and they had a bunch of drummers
The
on the
festival.
live
Yeah.
Dynamo, yeah. So I want Igor Cavalera up there, and like whoever else they had drumming as well.
Ooh.
So yeah, I want that experience. That would just be something. And that's just, and it would suck to never listen to that album ever again. But I mean, what an experience you'd have there. So yeah, I'll take Nail Bombs Point Blank live,
Wow.
and purely for that reason. And it's not particularly because I want to never listen to that album again, obviously because I do, but because you put a gun to my head, this is what I'm choosing, and that's my reasoning for that.
Yep.
Um, Listen to, uh,
Oh,
I it's got to be Fear Factory's Obsolete,
I figured this.
because I think it's the most complete out of all the albums. It's got bits of everything. It's got groovy songs, it's got fast songs, it's got the industrial metal, it's got clean singing, it's got harsh vocals, it's got bits of everything. So I think I'd be satisfied with that, because there are softer, sadder songs on there as well. You got timelessness and such. So there's a bit
Mm,
of variation. It's not all intense all the time.
yeah.
And you can argue that both those other albums have those sort of moments too. Not so much Nail Bomb, that's pretty in your face. But yeah, so I would listen to that because it's got the most variation. And
Yeah.
like I said, again, all these in albums influenced me heavily. So this was not an easy decision to make. So obviously that then leaves Erased. And I'd probably going to get a lot of shit for this, but split title. Like I was saying to you before we started recording, though, it's like if it never existed, though, then like how different would I be, and how different would all this filth be? Would there even be in all this filth? Because if you think it like that, you're like, whoa, would I even be into metal? If I'd never heard Slipknot, would I have, got into
Yeah.
a couple of bands and then just gone, yeah, music's not really for me, and then gone off and done something else with my life?
It's like a
Maybe.
it's like a Hot
We'll,
Tub Time Machine episode or something. I mean, movie.
exactly. We'll never know, and it's a fantastic album. But of those bands, I would like say that. And it's hard because Slipknot is still around. I mean, Fear Factory is still around too, as well. Technically, depending on your view.
Well,
But
technically with Slipknot too.
yeah, I mean, no, that's what I'm saying. Slipknot, yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. But yeah, I mean, out of those bands, obviously Nailbomb, they just did the one thing where they
Yeah.
hit it and quit it. So like, it's hard because it's like there,
Mm,
and it's always going to be there, and
mm.
there's going to be an up or a down for them because that's it,
Yeah, that's
which is
all.
cool, which is great, right? And that's all they wanted to do, so that's awesome. But the other bands, because they can constantly, still release things, there's going to be a drop here and there, and it's not so much that that's a bad album that they've released. It's just something that I don't connect with as much as I connected with the earlier stuff or whatever. And there are bands out there that like, for me, they drop and then they come back and they drop and they come back. And then that's not to say that they're, again, bad albums. It's just I haven't connected with that album. Machine Head for me is one of those bands where it goes up and down. I've always thought they're solid albums, but like, I think their last album they released of Kingdom and Crown, I think was fantastic. It was a good return to form. But that's
Mm.
just my opinion. And I still love Through the Ashes of Empires and Burn My Eyes and all that sort of stuff as well.
Oh,
So,
come on, the blackening, that's where it's at, though, eh?
yeah, okay. So, funnily enough, I liked the Blackening, but I didn't love it like everybody else. Like, I was all about Through the Ashes of Empires, man. I was just like,
Wow.
I thought that the Blackening was just an extended version of Through the Ashes of Empires. I thought the
Whoa.
longest song. Don't get me wrong, I love the Blackening. I'm
Yeah.
not. Yeah, I'm gonna be copping lots of hate here. But it's like he hates Slipknot, he hates
Calm
Machine.
down, comment section. Calm down. He's
Yeah.
explaining it.
Easy, easy. I don't hate Slipknot. I don't hate the Blackening. Because it was voted. I think the Blackening, Metal in Metal Hammer's guy, like the most influential album of that decade. I think it was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I get that, and I love the Blackening, but I prefer
Ashes through
the
empires or
Ashes of
whatever.
Empires.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for whatever reason, I think it was a little bit more honest. There was a little bit more. They were going through some changes. They were going, and they thought that might be their last ever album. So it's a
Ah.
bit more, not so much desperation, but there was just an edge to it that I think the Blackening didn't have. I mean, don't get me wrong, they played out of their minds on the Blackening, and it was a great album. But like they
Yeah.
started this some of the songs, I was like, I don't know if that needed to be 8 minutes long. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like farewell to arms.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. Actually, I
Great
think
song.
"Farewell to Arms" makes sense because that. But there was some other songs on there. I was
Oh,
like,
is it clenching of the fist
yeah,
something?
maybe.
It's like
I
a
think
10 minute track or something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Mind you, the latest album, the first song
Oh
on
yeah,
there,
they're all long tracks as well,
yeah,
actually.
10 minutes. They played that live actually when I saw
Ooh.
them 4 weeks ago. What's the first track off the new album called? Can't remember off the
Um,
top of my head.
no, me neither. It's
The something Slaughter the Martyr.
Slaughter the Martyr. Yeah, 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 yeah. Slaughter
Yeah,
the Martyr. Yeah, 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 yeah.
great song, great song. But
Great
either way,
track.
yeah, the Blackening, yeah, it's a great album, and yeah. But anyways, back to Slipknot. We're erasing it from history because mostly just because I had to choose an album basically, and that's the one that got left over. I mean,
Mm.
I hold Nailbomb and Fear Factory in higher regard than Slipknot these days, and so yeah. But again,
It's a
hugely
hard choice as well, though.
yeah, hugely influential on me and many people. Great band. Slipknot, were and are a great band,
Mm.
and I'm interested to see what they do next. With obviously, hopefully they'll have a new drummer. Some
Mm.
people say Eloy from Sepultura,
Yeah, that's
the
gonna
new
be
drummer.
intriguing.
That'll be interesting. Maybe it is. He'd be a good fit.
Mm.
But yeah, so yeah, that's the one I would erase purely because I had to make the choice of the three albums, and those are my reasonings. So yeah, that's what I've got to say.
No,
What
brilliant.
about you? What would you do?
I guess my erased is kind of made easy because it would be Nail Bomb, and that's purely because it's new kid on the block territory.
Yep.
You know, if I had listened to that thing probably 20 years ago, the same time as Slipknot and Fear Factory, uh, then yeah, I would dare say this would be a much harder choice for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, Nail Bomb would get erased because obviously I hold a much higher connection to the other two albums. But
Yeah.
easily I would listen to Slipknot and their self-titled album because that's like that record that got me into metal. It's an album that I'll jump back to often. And I
Yep.
understand what you're saying, like, with Obsolete, it's cool because there's a lot of versatility within that record. There's a lot of
Yep.
changes, which, for a Slipknot came in later, such as on, I think, Volume 3, when they started to do acoustic tracks and other stuff. Like, yeah, the self-titled record is raw power, young aggression, and that is great. And it shows a young band that is just thirsty to record.
Yeah, yeah.
And for that reason, as well as being a massive record from my childhood, I can't, I couldn't stop listening to that album. So it would leave obviously Fear Factory's obsolete to be listened to. Sorry, to go see live,
Yeah.
and would be a really cool record to go see for that lineup, that era of the band, and what a record to see live as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's not a bad choice here, really. No
No,
matter what you,
no,
like I said, the only bad choice is whatever's getting erased. Which
yes,
getting erased is a massive loss to metal history and a lot of people's childhoods and influences and such. Because again, yeah, Slipknot was my teen years. That was my jam, and
mm,
still, like I said, still is. I love that album. I love Iowa. And they yeah, just great. It's a great band, and like I said, if you erased it from history, where would we be today?
oh,
Just not just me, but metal in general. Where would we be? Like,
yeah.
because without that album, Slipknot doesn't do Iowa either.
I know a lot of people also just like give Slipknot a lot of flack or whatever, but bro, do you know how many people have been brought into the metal community because of Slipknot? Like,
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I actually think that. Okay, so like technically speaking, metal was never more popular than during the new metal era because that was the peak of record sales.
hmm,
Like just technically speaking, 2002 CD sales peaked in 2002,
yeah,
music sales in general. So that was just that era, but also because like a lot of the new metal did have a little bit of commercial appeal. There are people that
mm,
say listen to some new metal bands that don't really listen to metal. The sort of people that you see on that doco, that Woodstock 99 sort of stuff, like, right? So there are people that listen to Korn and Limp Bizkit that don't really get into metal.
yeah,
But Slipknot was that bridge, right? So like Slipknot was probably, if you class them as a new metal band, and some people do, was probably the heaviest new metal band, probably of all time. They took like some elements of new metal
mm,
and brought more like heavy and aggression into that, which then made it sort of more accessible for people that would maybe go to those sort of concerts, and maybe not get into the heavier elements of metal to sort of start exploring that. So, like you said, in a way, like, they say that, new metal, some people will argue new metal killed metal, but it didn't.
no,
And some people say new metal saved metal because it was waning in the 90s and the noughties and such. Um, but either way you look at it is I think new metal obviously was a time, and it did generate a lot of new fans for metal,
mm,
and Slipknot was a massive part of getting a lot of those sort of casual listeners into onto the dark side, come join us. And so yeah, huge,
oh
massive.
yeah.
And like, what sort of a band has they're still massive to this day. They have their own festival.
Yeah,
They
Notfest or something with Pantera. I mean, that would be probably one of their influences, but Pantera is reunited.
and
Yeah.
so, how many bands, let alone metal bands, can say they have their own festival? You look at Metallica. Metallica can do what they want because they're huge, huge, and everybody knows Metallica. They're like AC/DC. They're synonymous worldwide with just music in general.
Mm.
But yeah, and Slipknot are sort of in that league. Like, there's not too many metal bands coming out now
Nah.
that are ever going to be as big as Slipknot, just with the way the music industry is.
Yeah.
Like people say, "Oh, what about Lamb of God?" I'm like, yeah, Lamb of God are massive, but they're not Slipknot massive. Like.
Yeah, exactly. It's two different leagues, especially in regards to Lamb of God. And Lamb of God is like one of those weird. That's one of those bands that I transitioned from Slipknot to. You listen to Slipknot, then you
Yeah,
go, oh yeah, who's this Lamb of God fella? Yeah, and damn, that is when you go into people, back to I guess the point earlier on in the episode, we're talking about Slipknot's the heaviest thing ever here, but then you listen to Lamb of God and you're going, oh,
yeah,
what the bloody hell is this?
exactly. Yeah, actually, they were another massive influence on me in the early days. As the Palaces Burns and Ashes of the Wake.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Huge. huge for me growing up. And again, Chimera as well. I actually got into Lamb of God through Chimera.
All right.
I got into Chimera mostly because I bought their Pass Out of Existence album. Just because, back in the day, you could go to the CD store and you could flick through the metal section and basically you just go, oh, Roadrunner Records. And I'd be like, I'll give it a go. Why the
Yeah.
hell not? And
Yeah.
I literally picked up the Chimera album, Passed Out of Existence, saw all the mechanical shit and the blue cover and thought, that looks cool. Roadrunner Records. It's payday. I'm going to go give it a go. So I gave it a go and I was like, this band is awesome. Like, again, a bit of an industrial element and such.
Yeah, so Chimera is a band that I really haven't listened to in quite a long time, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I've got to go back, now you're bringing this up, and listen to them and just see, I guess, the connection between them and Lamb of God, because I can't quite recall it off the top of my head. But obviously, that's how you got into Lamb of God and, some other music like that through Roadrunner Records. I guess that was the connection, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went again. It's back when you could literally, yeah. Roadrunner Records was such an influential record label in metal. Like you'd go to the record store, you'd look at Roadrunner Records, and you'd just be like, cool. And I just gave Chimera a go through that. Got their album Passed Out of Existence. I liked the cover, got into it, and I had that like groove metal, industrial metal sort of like overtones going on, and I was like, yes, this is my jam, because I was big into Factory and Slipknot by that stage and such. So I got into them, and then through them, I saw they were touring, and Lamb of God was actually opening for Chimera back then. And so through that, I was like, oh, who's this Lamb of God? I checked out Lamb of God, and the album, they hadn't released Ashes of the Wake yet. They just the ads, the palaces burned. They literally were just about to. It was about 2003-ish.
Yeah, okay.
And then they released Ashes of the Wake, and the rest is history. But yeah, I got into Lamb of God through Chimera.
Interesting.
Mhm,
I
yeah.
mean, and, we could probably circle around a lot, especially around that record label in particular, for
Yeah.
quite a big opening in the metal community. That was a big Roadrunner is a big influence as far as, I guess, the early 2000s and metal community,
Yeah.
and influencing probably a lot of minds like ourselves. So, I guess thank you, Roadrunner, for bringing all this filth to my attention in a roundabout
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's they definitely, yeah, that label definitely, a lot of the band, well, not so much the label, but the bands on the label
Yeah, the
influenced.
band's on them.
Yeah, in a big way. Yeah, I mean, this whole discussion's just been about bands that have influenced me. So, yeah,
But that's half the fun of this one, these episodes anyway, So I think that perfectly sums up a very difficult list that I've given you as well. We've covered the bands on here in depth and discussed many aspects as well outside of it. But this has been a fun chat. This has been really cool to talk over these 3 albums, 2 of which I'm pretty damn familiar with, in particular Slipknot.
yeah.
I don't get to talk about this type of music often with some of the other people that I bring on my channel, so always love talking about this stuff whenever I can. So Brendan, I guess thank you for coming on the channel and being a willing participant of such a difficult list to be discussing.
Oh, well, no, thank you for having me. It's been a great chat. I love talking about music in general and like, this style of music, metal. It's like, it's what I do. It's what I live for. So yeah, love talking about it. I'll come back anytime. We'll do another 3 albums.
That's it, perfect. And we'll do long episodes as always, because I'm guessing you people who have stuck around to this point love watching us chat about such things. So everyone, if you haven't checked out Brendan's band, that's All This Filth. Go check them out. The album is out now. Tomorrow will be better. Check it out, because holy shit, was I impressed when I heard that. So everyone, thank you very much, Brendan, again for coming on. And I guess this has been a really good episode to finish up on this one here. So
Cheers for having me, Chili. It's been great. Like I said, let's do it again sometime.
hell yeah, keen. Everyone, you have a great day and stay spicy. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Live Listen Erased. And if you have enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it with all your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our Chili Con Carnage crew so you can get notified for all the future videos that we put out, as we put out videos every Friday. Also, we are on Discord, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter over at Live Listener Race, so make sure to tune in over there. And don't forget to like this video so that our manager can stay very happy.